Okay, so the next talk is one I'm really excited to see. It's The Secret Ingredients to Good Tenants by Neil Walton, and here he is. Hi, Neil.
Hey.
Thanks a lot for joining us. For the few people, which I doubt there's many, that don't know who you are, do you want to just quickly introduce yourself?
Yes, my name is Neil Walton. I founded the HMO Guys, which is a specialist HMO lettings agent. We founded just over 3 years ago now, so it's about 3.5 years ago. We currently manage just under 500 rooms across Greater Manchester, which at the moment are operating at 100% occupancy with rents pretty much above market rate, to be honest, across the board. We've had some of the situations Julie's just talked about, which is why I asked my question about WhatsApp, because I've just had a week-long conversation with a legal professional about it, to fair, because one of our landlords is asking us to use it, and we've been steered away from it in the past. But so that's where we've grown at scale. We've grown very quickly. We've got a team of 5 people, and obviously hoping to continue that.
Yeah, I'm very much on the anti-WhatsApp train, but mainly not so much on the GDPR thing. I've heard this.
It can be. Do you know what? So one of the things that really put us off it wasn't just GDPR. GDPR came up in part of it, if that makes sense. But the biggest thing that put us off it was you can't scale if you've got 70 WhatsApp groups on your phone and 500 text messages all day. You just can't do it. Like, it's because we have landlords who want WhatsApp groups, and if you've got, I don't know, 50 landlords with WhatsApp groups, 60 houses, do you know what? Your phone's just never going to stop. And where does your team have time to recharge during the day? Because it's not fair on them either.
Yeah. Right. So for everyone, again, throughout the talk, please ask your questions in the chat, Facebook, message me. I know I'm kind of not saying the names if someone messages me, just in case I kind of wanted to do it more quietly. But I will ask as many as we can get through when the talk's over.
And I'm going to close my eyes now.
Here we go.
And put my earplugs in and everything.
Let me just switch and let's go.
First of all, hello and thank you for having me and coming to watch me, and thanks to Van and the team for arranging today. I'm a little bit rusty at speaking to people because obviously we've had COVID, and as it's just been introduced, we've spent the last 2 years growing our business from pre-COVID. We were managing just under 100 units to, as of today, we're managing about 360 units. So what I'm going to first of all tell you is a little bit about what we do as a business, a little bit about me, my background, and why we set up doing what we do, and a little bit about the process of how we scaled looking for tenants in the marketplace and how we've managed to grow and retain and had some good success in it there. If anybody has any questions, obviously we'll tackle that at the end. And if anybody has any questions, my team are sat in the middle, and feel free to flag them down because they've all been avoiding talking to people all day so far. So first of all, about me, Neil Walton. I'm the MD of a company. My company is called the HMO Guys. We're based in Manchester, and we manage on behalf of investors and landlords across Greater Manchester, Warrington, and then we go a little bit into North Manchester as well, such as Rochdale and Oldham. Currently managing just under 400 rooms. I think it's about 386 as of today. And by the end of next month, it'll just be over 400 rooms because we've just found out today we've won 2 new developments as well. We launched in 2018, so we're just about 4 years old. So within 4 years, we've gone from nothing, if I'm honest. We were a side hustle. So initially, I did a small recruitment project. So I used to be a recruiter before, and I'll talk about where that comes into it, for a landlord that I knew. And then from that point, I did such a good job of it. That landlord then asked me to manage his portfolio. One of his friends asked me to manage his portfolio, and we grew from there. So we've done no real marketing to sort of expand the business on this side. All of our marketing is to do with gaining tenants. So we launched with one mission, and the mission was that when I worked in recruitment, what I noticed, I worked in recruitment of several sectors. One was graduate recruitment, and one was recruitment of senior professionals. But when I looked at it, and you looked at the most successful person in recruitment. The most successful person had a stable home, a stable base, had a support network. So when someone new comes into an area, and very much like Caroline was talking about, what we need to do is make sure that they have a stable base, a stable network, a stable home. So we set up with the ethos of creating homes within HMOs rather than just creating rooms. So we create rooms, we speak to tenants, we source tenants, we put tenants into the rooms, but we also make sure that they all match each other well, they all get on well, they're all managed well. My team over there, Meryl, make sure that they all get on well and make sure that they all match together. And if she hears me ask her if the person was nice one more time, she'll probably slap me. So we've got a briefing process in bringing new tenants into the portfolio. Lucy manages the maintenance, so her favourite thing is wheelie bins, to be honest. So she can tell you all about how to get things like that sorted and how to keep the domestic arrangements of a house working. And then we've got Charlotte, who I suppose looks after all the compliance. So she makes sure that if we have something that goes wrong, we've got the gas safety certificates in place, we've got all the fire safety certificates in place and things like that. That is important because if you're not offering the quality compliant product to your tenants, you're not going to maintain a quality tenant base, because tenants, especially when you get to a big city, are quite intelligent. Agents are quite intelligent in talking to other tenants about how it works. So the first thing we talk to about a tenant, if a tenant comes to us and says, I'm moving out of this HMO because the fire alarm goes off at 3 o'clock in the morning, the bins are always full, this is that. Do you know what? We can talk to them about our process of how the HMO is compliant, how it's managed, and how it's working. When I say what qualifies us to talk about what makes a good tenant, so as of today, we've sourced 708 tenants into rooms in the last 4 years. In that 4 years, we've had 5 occasions of tenants being in arrears, and as of this point, we haven't got any tenants in arrears with us. Over that 4 years and then 708 people, we've only had to evict one person, which is all to do with our matching process. And unfortunately, I've had to let 2 people go on a Section 21, basically on the fact that we didn't think they were suited to the house and they weren't, I suppose, adding to the secret ingredient of the house, to be fair, because if they are not matching the community, they're just going to cause turnover in the house. So it's about managing that process as well. The secret ingredient, I think, of starting, or the secret ingredient of good tenants is, first of all, the quality of the product that you produce for your tenants. So the way that we see it is the tenant is our customer. And although the landlord pays our bill, it's the tenant that's signing the check. So essentially, if we don't have a good quality tenant base in them properties, we're not going to have any payments off landlords, and we're not going to have any landlords there. So tenant is always the king. Doesn't mean we do everything they ask for, but means that we manage their expectations there. When you're looking at a development, our most successful developments, and we can look across the board of the 60 or 70 HMOs that we manage with sort of 400 rooms, and we can look at which is the most successful, which has the best occupancy, and look at why. And that's given us some sort of secret ingredients to do it. And those of you that are HMO investors will know the first sort of key thing when you're looking at a new development is the location of it. So we get lots and lots and lots and lots of phone calls, probably every day, to be honest, from investors looking to do new HMOs in areas. And the first thing we look at is, if we were to help you develop a HMO in that area, where are your tenants going to come from? Because there's no point in having 14 bedrooms that's 20 minutes away from the nearest transport link, 40 minutes away from the nearest supermarket. You know what? You might get the best value deal or the cheapest deal you can. You might get the most number of rooms, but if you can never fill those rooms or keep them at full occupancy, you've not got one of the ingredients to having the best tenants. So location is first, transport links is second. So we service an area in Greater Manchester called Salford, and certainly what we find there is when we look at things like the tram links, we look at things like the bus links, from a house, if your house is not 10 minutes walk from a major transport link, getting good tenants is a challenge. And we certainly see that if you've not got that ingredient, you get lower quality tenants in that property. We also look, and one of the key things that I think you should all look at when you're doing your next development is, have you got any either key or destination employers in the area? So if we were to look at the difference between a destination and a key employer, so if I look at our area, destination employers are where people want to work, because I suppose Manchester as a whole is a destination city. But our key employers, so for example, in Manchester, we've got brands like Misguided, ASOS, we've got the Hut Group, we've got lots of Amazon and things like that, and look at what the workforce is in that area. So if we look at the two of the areas we manage, and we look at the tenant bases in them, we've got Amazon in two of the different areas. But one of the Amazon sites is a professional Amazon site, which means that this site has graduates working there, graduate trainee schemes, etc. And then if we look at the other area on the other side, and I can see Meryl's nodding at me here, to be fair, because she knows what I'm going to say next. We've got a site which is a heavily industrial Amazon site with lots of pickers, packers, and warehouse. So what you need to look at is when you do your product, the secret ingredient there to getting good tenants is understanding the marketplace for that. So if your tenant is somebody who's a picker or packer in, say, ASOS, which has got the depot in sort of East Lancashire, the Hut Group, which is in Warrington, if them tenants are your marketplace and them tenants can afford a certain level of rent, we need to design your product around what that sustained market is. And you also need to understand the difference between what a key employer is and a destination employer. So your key employer is somebody like the NHS, somewhere like local government, somewhere like offices, something that's always going to be there, something that's always going to be an attraction to the area. A destination employer, as Lee talked about customer services, and some of them were on there, won't necessarily always be there. So we've got to look at what's always be there and where your sustained cash flow comes from, which is a good tenant, and where you're going to get your influx of tenants that have the sort of bigger money to create your cash flow. So after you've worked out your key destination, I think you need to look then at the demand. And that's one of the secret things. We've maintained occupancy. The last 4 years, our average occupancy has been 97.4% across the whole portfolio. It did go down a little bit during COVID. And at the minute, we're operating on 100% occupancy. But when we take on a new development and we talk to a new landlord about it, we look at the tenant base. And we don't take on every investment that comes our way. What we do is we look at it and go, is there a marketplace? Is there a tenant? Where are these people coming from? What kind of people are going to live here? And one of the things that my good friend Caroline talked about earlier was the fact that she had a house share that a tenant had come from, and there was sort of like a mid-60s guy in there, 22-year-old girl in there, and a mix of tenants. And really, the secret ingredient to getting that right is that we need to create a community in it. So one of the things that we've done as an agent, we specialise in accommodation for the 18 to 35-year-old market, which really, I suppose, is 20 to 35. We try as much as possible to have somebody who's professional or qualified in it, and then we're sort of creating some level of cohesion between them. So we make sure that there are people that, although they may not have hobbies in common, somebody who's 20 and somebody who's 25 will probably have some memories in common, will probably have some times in common, and will remember some key events in the past as well. The other thing that we do to make sure that we get it right is we understand an investment in terms of metrics. I'm not going to go on too much about numbers because it's pretty boring, but when we take on a house, so we take on a house in this area, we can look at that house and say, right, it's got 6 bedrooms, and we can look at the demographic of it and say that we know that if we need to let this property within 4 weeks with these kind of tenants, we need to see this many viewings, we need to have this many inquiries, and this many will convert into lettings. So we can pre-plan our business and understand the pipeline, and ultimately understand the manpower that we need behind it, or the girl power, to be honest, because I'm the only boy. I think when you're looking at the secret ingredient of tenants, you're looking at the community, it becomes ever so important, more so in the smaller houses, because if you've got a 4-bedroom property that has 4 people in it and one person isn't a very nice person, to be frank, that can create the whole demographic to go wrong. If you've got a 14-bedroom house, which is probably our mid-sized development, so our developments go at the moment from 4 bedrooms to 22, the 14-bedroom property, you can have the odd person that may not get on. Now, I'm not saying they're not going to be a nice person, but you can have people with more different interests in them houses and maybe slightly wider age gaps. So you might have, in a 14-bed, you might have a group of 20-year-olds, you might have a group of 30-year-olds, but it's getting that mix right so that everybody's got somebody to get on with. We also make sure there's always boys and girls in each house because, to be honest, or men and women, if you want to say that, boys and girls is my phrase. Because I think if you don't mix the demographic up, you don't want to leave somebody on their own because, and you can talk to Lucy about this afterwards when she's networking outside because we're going to make sure she talks to some people soon. But when you talk to Lucy outside, ask her what happens when you've got a house of all girls or a house of all boys. 2 very different scenarios, but I think she'd agree completely with me that we don't want a house of all boys or all girls. So although I think, and as an investor, one of the key things about getting it right, you've got a HMO, you've got 4 or 5 people in it now, and then you go and visit it. I think you've got to get it right in your head and make peace with that investment so that you've stepped away from it. It's no longer your house. It's not your, it is your property, but it's not where you live. And I think what you've got to look at when you go on an inspection to make sure this ingredient and this home is happy is it's not necessarily kept to your standards, but look at, are the people in this house happy? Because what we find an awful lot is that we'll get an investor who'll come back to a property and look at it and go, oh, the kitchen's a mess. The wheelie bins are a bit full. There's a bike in the hallway. Do you know what? How long have your tenants been there? Are they happy there? Are they staying there? And is it going to make your investment cash flow more or less by managing that situation? So if there's no issue of safety, there's no issue of damage, make sure you view it as this is somebody's home. Are them people happy living in that home? And that leads me, I suppose, on to my final point. And the final point is pricing, which is, I suppose, in the forefront of everybody's minds at the moment because we've just seen rents hike up as high as they've been in a long time. To give you an idea, our rents in Manchester sort of range from probably about 495 to our highest rent, which is probably, I think it's 775. And I'm looking at Meryl to nod at me. Yeah, okay, perfect. So she's the lady that gets that. So our highest rent's 775. And if we look 12 months ago, we've probably added 100 quid onto all of them figures. A, because of utilities, B, because of housing demand, and C, because of the way the area's progressing, more employers coming in, more demand for accommodation. But I think where we've got to get pricing right is we've got to look at it and go, do you know what, we can get that 775, maybe 800 for a room. But in your investment, is it key to you to get that £800 a month for a tenant that stays for 6 months? Or is it key to you to get maybe £25 less, but have a tenant that stays with you for 18 months or 2 years? And so what you've got to do when you're looking at that part of the deal, make sure your opportunity cost is scaled across the level of your investment, because the best investment isn't always the investment that turns over tenants every 6 months. Certainly doesn't help us, certainly doesn't help you, and certainly doesn't help your cost base either, because you can't turn over a tenant every 6 months without having voids, without having maintenance issues, and things like that. I suppose the final area to talk about is making sure that your agent or you as a landlord are compliant. So one of the things that we really struggled with in the beginning, and I suppose less so now, is that lots of local councils don't ask to see things like fire risk assessments, which means that you legally need one for your license, but a council isn't going to ask to see it, which means that a lot of people think, you know what, I don't need to do that because I've got my license, I've got my insurance, it's all okay. And make sure that you get your things like your fire risk assessments in place, because if you have something happen, and we really hope that doesn't happen, we have had a fire in one of our HMOs, and touch wood, it was a very small fire and it didn't cause any damage. But what that highlighted to us is that actually we had the safety procedures in place, fire alarm went out, somebody went out and stopped it, somebody went out and fixed it. It was all dealt with in a matter of probably 48 hours. But as a tenant in that house, tenants were a little bit worried that this happened. But equally, we didn't lose any tenants because they saw that we had the procedure in place to deal with it. And I think that's the key ingredient to retaining them tenants, is making sure that you've got the procedure in place. So if you're a tenant, you're living in that house, something goes wrong, how do you report it? How does it work out for you? How quickly does somebody fix it? If it's something that we're not necessarily going, because there's some things that a tenant will want improvement on, you don't fix, how do we negotiate with the tenant to make sure they're happy with the outcome as well? So you get maximum value from your investment and maximum cash flow from it as well. Some pretty simple things you need to make sure that the person managing your house has for your compliance as well. Just to make sure they've got obviously your client money protection insurance, membership to a professional redress scheme, and your client accounting. I've got to be honest, we've come across several agents we've taken properties from that haven't followed that procedure, and that doesn't protect you as an individual, doesn't make your investment compliant, but means that if something goes wrong, you've potentially lost a lot of money as well. I'm pretty much at the end of what I wanted to say. I want to say basically, if you could take on an agent that you're going to work with, please feel free to come and talk to us or talk to any of the other agents in the room. But make sure you deal with somebody you like, somebody you're compliant, somebody you've got a business partnership with. Because to be honest, as an agent, we're not always going to, I need to word this very carefully so we don't seem too bolshy about it, but we're not always just going to take instruction. Do you know what? If you come to us with an instruction about your HMO and we disagree that it's the right avenue for you to take. If you're making cash flow and money out of your house, we're making cash flow and money out of it as well. So sometimes we will push back on that. So make sure you've got to have a good working relationship, because do you know what? Somebody is going to come to you, and as a landlord, you're going to say, I want to do this. And you want us to be that person that goes, actually, yeah, do you know what? That's a cracking idea. Or you want us to come back to you and say, actually, do you know what? The tenants in this area would appreciate this more, would bring this more, because actually you've got to go for the market. Because at the end of the day, remember, for you, your HMO is a product. It's a product that brings you cash flow, income, and brings you hopefully a very healthy living in the long run. And in the end, for your tenants, it's their home. And I think view it as it belong in the time of their tenancy, as long as they're not damaging it, as long as they're looking after it, and as long as they're treating it in what you'd call a tenant-like manner, let them live their lives in it. And that's me. So anybody who's got any questions?
Awesome. That was brilliant. And from a guy
It wasn't as bad as I thought either.
yes, from a guy who's seen pretty
I
much
do be laughing
everything in
at me, because
HMOs.
do you know what? I was like so tempted to like turn the camera off and go and like sit downstairs for 10 minutes.
It's funny how much everyone's hating watching themselves back. Okay, let's kick off with the questions. Great talk, Neil. One of the comments.
Thank you.
Okay, right. So, first things first. What happens when you have a house all of boys and all of girls?
So do you know what? They're two different things, if I'm honest. And my team watching this, I've got to get this answer right. I haven't had to bet because I've noticed them in the people watching. But girls' houses tend. Do you know what? Girls' houses tend to be really messy because girls, as a rule, have more things. To be honest, do you know what? Like, if we go and look in my bedroom in a second, well, we're not going, but if you did, you know, I've got like a wardrobe with t-shirts, jeans, and a few jackets in it and stuff like that. Whereas, do you know what? Generally, and I don't want to be sexist, but ladies tend to be a little bit more glamorous than us boys, to be honest. I mean, I know you've probably got a collection of dresses in your wardrobe, man, to be fair, but
One or two.
put it that way around. Girls tend to have a little bit more things. Boys' houses, they tend to be less messy, but less clean. Because you know what? They care a little bit less about wiping the sides down. They care a little bit less about emptying the bins and things like that. So it's just about sort of getting that demographic right. And I think that also, if you had a house of all boys, or a house of all girls, and you've got a vacant room, the likelihood is that if the only tenants that are coming along at that point are of the opposite sex, do you know what? Generally speaking, one boy doesn't want to live with 5 girls, and generally speaking, one girl doesn't want to live with 5 boys. There are obviously times when that's a completely different scenario. You know, I wouldn't think twice about putting myself in that situation, but lots of people would, and lots of people couldn't hold their own in that situation, which again could, going back to Julie's talk, would create some conflict there, to be honest. I think that you've got to have, ideally what we would say is, if we've got a 6-bed house, we wouldn't want really more than 4 boys and 2 girls, or 2 boys and 4 girls in it, because we don't want to leave anybody on their own. To be honest, it's about matching that dynamic and making that co-living home, I suppose, rather than the shared, you know, the cash flowing home.
Yeah. A couple of other nice comments you've had. Kirsty said impressive, and Caroline has said very adequate and slightly above average talk. No, she said great talk.
Well, I text Caroline before saying, if you're not watching it, you're dead to me.
But she also just said, I agree, Neil, 50-50 male-female split is the best where possible. Question just come in. Alex has asked, how long would you hang out with a void, though?
So, to be honest, voids aren't really a big problem with us. So, I mean, we've operated since probably at least the last 8 or 9 months at 100% occupancy. And I said 97 point something, wasn't it? That I sort of said, because I worked it out before I did my talk, to be fair. I don't work out every week. But we don't have a huge problem with voids. What we have a problem with is searching through the tenants, really, that come in and deciding who the right person is. Because do you know what? Just because you have 10 applicants doesn't mean any of them are right. And so what you've got to do is start your marketing early. So when you get a notice off a tenant, you start your marketing, and really you're interviewing them people. My background's recruitment, interviewing them people to sort of decide whether they're right for you, for your home. And you don't always get it right. And I think, as Julie said, if you've not got it right, you need to be at that point, have the conversation with the tenant. Do you want to leave early? Are you happy here? And then really, we've only had 2 evictions now. Actually, I said one in the talks. It's 2 now because we've done another one. But have that conversation of, if you're not right for it, if that person's not fitting in, and they've got 6 people in the house and 5 aren't happy with them, the likelihood is they're not happy there either. So let's have a conversation going, do you know what? If it's not right for you, we're not going to hold you to it. Let's, do you know what? Help you find somewhere better for you, and let's help us find somebody better for this house. But again, it might not be that person might not right for that house, but it might also mean that we don't exit them from the portfolio because there might be a house that's better suited for them. It might not be anything they're doing that's bad for the house. There might just be a personality mismatch. So it's about that. But no voids, I'll be honest, if you get notice off your tenant, you've got at least a month to fill the room. And if you jump on it as soon as it happens, the only time we get voids really is if the product is below par, which we're lucky enough now that we've offboarded things that we didn't want, if I'm honest. Or if your location isn't right, because do you know what, location, and every investor talks to me, location is so important. It determines the quality of the people you get 80%.
There's another question kind of that crosses over with that. Have you or would you ever turn down managing a property because you think it would be really hard to fill the house with high quality tenants? Or would you just be upfront with the owner and accept that the property possibly will take you more effort?
So it's not about effort really, to be honest, because we have turned properties down, but we turn so out of say 10 properties we offer, we probably take somewhere between 6 and 7 on board, because we talk to the landlords or the owners about the property and about how we would work with them. And you know, we're sometimes not right to work with them because we want that open and honest relationship. You know, if you've got that HMO and you've got X amount of issues, we want to come to you openly and say, this is the best solution, this is how to deal with it. And we want to have an open and frank conversation with you. But if you've got, I don't know, a house of 7 beige boxes that's in an area where you've got 16 designer houses surrounding it, you know, you want us to have that conversation and say, do you know what, Van, you've not got the best product in your street. And if you want the best cash flow, we're going to have to do something to make that better. And I had a similar thing. Well, I had something happen where I met an agent at a networking event, actually, probably about 3 weeks ago. And we'd taken a portfolio of 3 houses off them. And they were like, oh, how are you getting on with them houses? Because they were horrible. They were, you know, we had these problems and these problems. And to be honest, these houses work really well for us now. But I was quite open with them. I said, when we took them on, we inspected them before we took them on, and we said, if you want to compete in the marketplace that we operate in this location, we need to make some changes to help you compete in that area. And that landlord, although she, and she'll remain nameless, although she was, in some ways, she was a bit disappointed that she had to do some work on it, she appreciated the honesty of the feedback of why we were doing it. And then now, 12 to 18 months after, she's thinking, do you know what, my rents are up 150 quid a month on each room. And before I was having voids of 4, 5, 6, 7 weeks. And so I think it's about understanding whether you work together. We would only not take a house on if a landlord wasn't prepared to provide a quality product, if they weren't prepared to do maintenance in an entirely manner, if they weren't prepared to do the compliance and safety stuff, because that's paramount for us, or if it was in a location that was impossible to fill. We got offered like a 16-bedroom property in North Manchester, and to be honest, its nearest transport link was like a good 20-minute walk, and we didn't take that on because there's no chance we're going to find 15 drivers to fill it, and there wasn't 15 parking spaces. So when you're stacking your deal, you need to understand who you're marketing to and who's going to live there.
Yeah. Kirsty has just asked, how would you look at demand?
Difficult one, to be honest. So we look at it through a number of ways. We look at it through spare room, but spare room isn't always that accurate, because do you know what? You can look at how many rooms are available. You can look at how many tenants are looking. But do you know what? How many sources have got adverts on there looking to see what demand's like? How many, fake profiles is there? We get landlords will say to us, do you know what? This is really good. Why is my room only getting £650 a month, but there's an advert on for £750? And you're like, well, do you know what? Because that's not a real house when you look at it in detail. but also you've got to remember that the prices that properties are being listed at isn't necessarily the price they're being sold at either. So you've got to bear in mind some agents put like several different adverts on and things like that, and some landlords test the market. We do it a lot by experience, if I'm honest, because we manage. One of the things we did is when we set up, we said we were going to manage sort of pods, I suppose, or areas, where houses are close together. So we can now say if we've got, on Central Salford and M5, we've probably got 160 rooms. So we consistently advertising and consistently judge how many calls we're getting from it, things like that. And then we can also look at things like the HMO register to see what demand is like. But then equally, do you know what? You need to speak to experts in your local area, because it's very difficult. Because just because an area may appear saturated, like Salford have said to us that Salford's saturated, and we've got Article 4 in place now to sort of help with that. I don't think it is saturated, because do you know what? If you give me 50 more rooms in Salford tomorrow, we'd fill them by the end of next week.
Yeah.
The right rooms, obviously. But
yeah. One thing.
You don't want 50 garden sheds.
There's a demand, I guess.
Probably at the moment there is, to be honest.
It's a very landlordy market. One thing you just mentioned about the fake profiles made me think recruitment, and look at this question. So you and Julie, I think both had a recruitment background, I think you said, so it's relevant.
Maybe. I was a recruiter for 15 years, and I started as a trainee consultant when I was a graduate and left as like an area manager. When I decided that I wanted a different life.
So the question around this was, are there any main skills you've taken from your recruitment experience to looking for HMO tenants? And hopefully you're not going to say, build fake profiles.
No, I mean, it's all based around it, to be honest. So it's finding a good tenant for your property. It's all about meeting them, getting to know them, liking them, and then trusting them, to be honest. So if you look at an interview process, you're going to find out where they've come from, why are they moving. You're going to find out what they do and will they fit in here. I don't think that everybody has to have similar careers in a house, I think, but somebody has to have a synergy. So one of the things that we did, and we had a landlord last week actually who came to us, and she gave us the third property she's given us. And she said, when I first started working with you, I thought it was really odd that you were just working with sort of 20 to 35-year-olds. And we'll sometimes go a bit older, we'll sometimes, flex it depending on the location. She goes, but then when we came to buy this house that we've just finished refurbing, there was two 50-year-old divorced guys living in it. And we couldn't evict them. And when we did evict them, they'd been smoking in the rooms, they'd been drinking in the rooms, they've got the most damaged rooms in there. And really, they'd just been put in because they were the available tenant at the time. Yeah. And so she suddenly understood that the process we're going through, we haven't chose ages to be ageist, but what we've chosen is an age group where somebody's going to have something in common. So although, I'm getting old now, so it's difficult to sort of correlate with this, but when you look at sort of like a 20-year-old and sort of a 30-year-old, they'll have generally watched some similar TV programs as a kid. They may have watched some similar soap operas. They'll have done some similar social type things and stuff like that. So even though that 20-year-old is talking to the 35-year-old, they've got some common ground where they can find something to start their relationship with.
Yeah, I guess on that, like talking about older tenants, a question came in about this. With the growing demand for shared living for older tenants, would you start to take older tenants? Now, I know you recently celebrated your 50th birthday, so kind of understand the demographic a bit more. Is that something you'd experiment with?
It's my 23rd, actually, Alan. 23rd, I wish it was. And it wasn't my 50th either, to be fair. But would so at the moment, we wouldn't. I'm not saying that we wouldn't in the future, but I think that it depends on where you are in the country, I think, a lot, if I'm honest, because I think there's, in some of the more expensive cities, I think there's certainly a case for it as well. But I think in the area that we're in, certainly if somebody's having some success in life, generally when you get to that age group, you can afford to live in a different situation, to be honest. And I think what we're trying to do as a company is providing stable homes for young people to sort of launch their life from. And because that, you know, they need a safe place to live, but probably can't afford £1,000 a month in rent. But do you know what? Can afford to pay us £600, £700, £800 a month for a bills inclusive room that's nice enough for them in that point, and to give them some safety while they get themselves to the level to take the next step. My concern with the older tenants, and maybe I'm going to sound ageist for a second, but is that if you've got to that point in your life where, and then we're talking about two different types of people, but if you've got to the point in your life where your HMO room is still your only option, we need to look at whether they're right for the people they're living with more than anything. I think there's another community where I suppose they're choosing to live in a HMO, and that's something we maybe would explore. But I think it's got to be somebody who's choosing to live in it, not somebody who feels like they're stuck and that's their only option. I think
that's the key to this. Yeah, I'm starting to see like the growing kind of people over a certain age like opting to live with other people, maybe because of life circumstance changes, divorces, even widows kind of thing.
Yeah, and I think if you want to live in that situation, that's a different matter to if that's your only option, to be honest. Yeah. And I think that's it. If you're trying to create a really cohesive, vibrant, moving product that helps people, probably somebody who's, you know, miserable because they don't really want to be there because, you know, the wife's chucked them out or the husband's chucked them out or whatever, they're not the right people to put into that community, because it is a community and it is a home.
Yeah, I think we've got time for one more. Caroline said, totally agree, Neil. That wasn't the question, though. But Kirsty has asked, spoke to letting agents and HMO management agents who say there is a demand. Can I believe them? The council say they have a huge list of applications for licensing. Is that a bad thing?
Do you know what? I can't answer that for you, to be honest, because do you know what? Councils always have massive lists of people waiting for licensing, because do you know what? Some of the areas we work in takes over a year to get your license from application to actually being approved. That doesn't, you know, in one of the councils we work in is a really high growth area. And I feel so sorry for this poor HMO lady that sort of does all the licensing. They've got one person who works an 8-day fortnight. You know, she's going to have a massive list no matter what. Agent, do you know what? You need to meet the agent, decide whether you like them, decide whether you trust them, you know, ask them to sort of talk to you about what they do. And only you can decide, because I think it's a very subjective. There's great agents out there, and you know, we've got very good agent friends across the country that we work with and we refer people to as well. And again, there's shocking agents out there as well. And I don't want to be negative about it, because I think we've got a very valid industry, and there's a need for good agents out there, because actually, the old conflict Julie was talking about earlier, you know, if we had better people selecting tenants and a more stringent process and more streamlined process, we wouldn't have as many conflict issues in the HMOs. And we've had very few, we have people arguing about the bins, but you know what? We can sort that out, to be fair. Like, it's a pain in the arse, and Lucy and my team, you know what, knows everything there is to know about wheelie bins and getting people to take them out, and she wishes she didn't. But you know what? Ask your agent how they deal with things.
Yeah. Right.
But yeah, I don't know the answer to that one, really, because it's subjective depending on where you live and where you want to develop.
Cool.
Maybe Coho could work that out for you.
Maybe we already have. Okay, I think we haven't really got any time left, unfortunately.
It's all right, because I'm hungry, so I don't mind.
They haven't eaten all day. There is one anonymous question on whether you're wearing your standard business trousers.
I am today. So Lee, who's watching, dared me to sit here in my boxer shorts and do it, and I was like, if I'm honest, I'm not bothered and I do that. But I got home quite late because there's an accident on the way home. So yeah, I've got standard jeans on. I did think about putting some high heels on there just to make it a bit more of a comical talk, to be honest, at the end, but I couldn't find them.
Right, well, thanks a lot for joining us.
It's all right, no worries. If anybody has any questions as well, separately, feel free to give me a shout.
Cool. Okay, well, yeah, thanks everyone for joining us tonight.